Welcome to the second screencast in the Animal Studies unit. This screencast will cover lesson structure, setting up science notebooks, and lessons 1 and 2 in the unit. STC lesson structure. How are STC lessons structured? When you open to tab 4 in the teacher's guide, you'll see all of the lessons in chronological order. They always start with an overview and objectives. The overview is a summary of what students will do and learn throughout the unit. The bullet point objectives help me to write my objectives for my lesson plan. The next section is teacher background, and this can be helpful if you're teaching a topic that's unfamiliar to you. I also find it very helpful when one of my very inquisitive students asks me a question. This teacher background section helps to prepare me for possible questions my students might have. Next, we have materials. The materials section is structured so that you can see what each student will need, what each group of students will need, and what the class will need for this lesson. Then we have the prep section. This tells you what to actually do with the materials before you start teaching. You might have to cut string a certain length or prepare materials for the habitat. Then we have the procedure. So this is the steps of the lesson. Next is the final activities section, or the sense-making part of the lesson. This is where you get to take all the learning you've done with your students and tie a nice, neat bow on it. Maybe you answer the question that you posed at the beginning of class that guided the lesson. Maybe you have students share what they learned to add to a what I learned chart that you keep in the classroom. After that is the extension section. If you want more, don't worry. STC gives you ideas of how to extend the science or make connections to other subjects like math or language arts. Then we have the assessment section. There's always an assessment written in for each lesson. Science notebooks. How do I set up science notebooks? Why are science notebooks important? Well, they serve as a record of the students' learning over the course of the year. It's a lot less photocopying for the teacher. And, well, real scientists use notebooks every day to keep track of their thinking and record data. So giving this experience to students in the classroom is so important. So how do I set up my science notebooks? Well, I have 4 physical parts that I add to the notebook. I have a science notebook rubric, so the students know how they'll be graded and what's expected of them. I have a table of contents to help keep them organized. I have a cover page, so there's some room for creativity and organization. And I have accountable talk stems to help my students talk and write like scientists over the course of the year. The science notebook rubric, well, I have them tape or glue this on the front cover of their notebook. This is the first thing I want the students to see so they know what's expected of them and how they'll be graded. And if you need a notebook rubric, we have rubrics for grades K to 12 on the BPS Science Weebly page, so make sure to check that out. Table of contents. I always use the first 3 to 4 pages, and I require students to write the date, the title, the assignment, and the page number. This really helps when they want to look back at something later in the year. Cover page. This is a chance for the students to be creative. They can do bubble letters, they can draw pictures that come to their mind when they think of the title of the unit. Accountable talk stems. These get taped or pasted into the back cover of the notebook for reference. I want students to be able to write like scientists and talk like scientists throughout the year. So these accountable talk stems help to structure and model what the language of a scientist looks like and sounds like. What about the inside of the notebook? How are the pages inside the notebook structured? Well, on the left side, I always have the students write the big question for the day. This is the guiding question of the lesson. This is like their objective. They know that we're going to work hard to find the answer to this question over the course of the lesson. And I always have them answer it before we start the lesson because this probes for me what they already know about the topic. And then at the end of the lesson, during the last 10 minutes, I come back and we do a class answer that we co-construct together so the students have the opportunity to see the correct science. On the right side of the notebook, that could be used for a variety of things. Observations and data collection, like you see below. We have a millipede habitat and data about the distance of a vehicle traveled. It could be used for sense-making opportunities or a space to wonder where students can write questions. So here's an example of some sense-making with vocabulary, kinetic energy, potential energy, and here's an example of students writing what they want to know about millipedes. So what's the most important part of the lesson? It's the sense-making. It's the last 10 minutes. So make sure that happens and make sure they record it in their notebooks. So lesson 1 in the Animal Studies unit, thinking about animals in their homes. Basically, lesson 1 is a KWL. I write the names of each animal on chart paper, and then I give my students a pile of stickies so they can write all the things that they know about each animal, and later they can compare them and just put a sticky note on the chart paper. Now you might want to put a little extra piece of tape on the stickies so they don't fall off, because you're going to come back to this at the end of the unit. There's also a worksheet where the students think about what animals might need to survive in the classroom. Lesson 2, they start to think about inviting animals into the classroom. So you draw this web on chart paper about the school environment, and you have them help you brainstorm observations of living and non-living things in their school environment. And then they help you put them into groups. And the second part about that is they have some readings about each of the animals, and they begin to think about what do you need to bring frogs, millipedes, and fiddler crabs in the classroom. Now, if you have the students in groups of 4, one group reads about one animal. So you might have your first group of 4 read about frogs, your second group of 4 read about millipedes, and your third group of 4 read about fiddler crabs. So this has been an introduction to the Animal Studies unit, lessons 1 and 2, some tips and tricks on notebooks, and how the unit and the lessons are structured. We'll see you in the next screencast.